Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan guru-murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guest this week is an extraordinary music producer. Rubin is associated with the birth of hip hop because he was one of the co-founders of Def Jam, but he's worked with rock artists. He went on to run Columbia Records. He's worked with so many of the greats, it's pretty impossible to list them, but also pop musicians, Ed Sheeran, you name it. And he's written a remarkable book about creativity, which is why we are here to talk to him today in a studio in West London. Rick, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Your book starts really with the idea, I suppose, that anyone can be a creator, an artist.
It starts with the idea that we all are creators, whether we recognize it or not. And we live in the world making creative decisions every day. And the artist is the one who, I want to say, takes ownership of these choices and curates them in a more, let's say, in a more serious way.
Because I'm reading this thinking, but this is a man who has worked with geniuses, with master craftsmen.
Yes.
And women. How can you say that this is in all of us?
Yeah, it is. And 100% it's in all of us. And there are people who are just as talented as the people that I get to work with. We all have a capacity. It doesn't mean everyone who engages in art is going to do world level stuff. That's not the point. And the people who make it, who do work at the highest levels, they don't always know that they're working at the highest level. It's interesting to know many artists, great singers, are ashamed to listen to their own voice. It's a normal human thing. It helps if we remove these pedestals of these people are great. Yes, there are people who are great and they deserve our love. And everyone has this potential. Again, maybe not to be the best in the world, but to be the best that they can be. And that's all we're here to do, is we each strive to be our best. One of the things we talk about in the book is like being better than someone else is not, to me, it's not very interesting, but being better than I was yesterday, that's something I can do forever.
I mean, you mentioned talent. What's your definition of talent?
There are different versions. One version of talent is someone who practices something to the point where they achieve an ability that is beyond. I don't know that one happens as frequently as another talent where someone's point of view is so unique, the way they see the world is so unique, and they're so effective at sharing how they see the world that it allows us to see what they see. And maybe not exactly what they see, because that's maybe impossible, but a glimpse of something that we might not otherwise see.
And I mean, you also talk about art or creativity as something that is around us and that we've got to grab.
Yes.
Just explain that to me.
Yes. As creators, we're vehicles to allow creation to happen. Rarely, maybe never, does something come from inside of us. It may get reformed within us, but it doesn't start within us. We are the sum total of our life's experiences, what we've learned, what we've seen, the emotions that we've felt, the dreams that we've had. And that's the material from which everything we make comes. And sometimes we know it and sometimes we don't, because it's not always conscious. You may see something and have a reaction to it and then tell me about it. And that reaction, the reason you have that reaction is based on something from childhood that you don't remember. It happens all the time to all of us. If you've ever done therapy, you know that things come up in therapy and the therapist says, a year ago you said this. I wonder if this is related to that. And like, of course, why didn't we're too close to see what's going on. So there's information that the planet is a productive planet. If you look outside, you see green. Nature is constantly growing, and man, as part of nature, is participating in this growth. The building we're sitting in was made by people who ate vegetables that grew outside. Now they have a design for a building, they build the building. That's all part of the same thing. It's all part of this, the productive nature of the planet. And we're playing our parts. So whether you're a musician or whether you're an architect or whether you make television programs, you're participating in this constant flow of information that's coming out. And if you don't do it, someone else will. It may not be exactly the same, and that's why it's important for all of us to play our role. If we don't play our role, no one's going to play our role for us. No one can do your job for you. They can do their job. They could sit in your seat and do their job, but they can't do your job because you're you. You know, it's your point of view, and we are all different. We are all our own, we all see it a different way.
Well, when you were starting out,
Yes.
what did you see as your role? You know, did you see yourself as a creative, as a creator, or did you see yourself as somebody who was going to work with creators and talents?
I just loved music. I didn't know that I would have a job doing this. I did it because it was something I loved, and it turned into a job, which is I'm still shocked. I didn't know there was such a thing.
Can you tell me about the beginning? How did it begin?
Yeah, I was always loved music from the time I was a child. It was always the most important thing in my life, and played in punk rock bands. Was lucky to be in New York when the hip hop revolution happened, and it was a completely underground music, as underground as any tiny genre that most of the people you know don't know about. That's what hip hop was at one point in time. I was lucky to be in the place where that was happening. And I would see these, there was a club called Negril on 2nd Ave, I believe it was on 2nd Avenue in Manhattan. Downstairs it was a reggae club, and one night a week they would have DJs from the Bronx and Harlem come and spin and do what was happening at block parties in those places. And it was the most exciting music I'd heard. That and punk rock together, they were both this like music from the street. You didn't have to be a virtuoso. It was more, again, this raw point of view. It's like street art, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, there is a direct line, isn't there, between punk and hip hop, really?
It was for me. I don't know that there were, for, like, many punk rockers didn't like hip hop and many hip hoppers didn't like punk rock. But for me, it was the same. It was this birth of music from people who had things to say and who didn't fit into the category, in the hierarchy of the conservatory, let's say.
So why did you want to start a label?
I wanted to make music, and I didn't know how it worked. So when you make music and you want people to hear it, you have to put it onto a disc at that point in time. And I didn't know that you could go and ask someone else to do it. You just do it. So again, coming from punk rock, the do-it-yourself idea was a big part of punk rock. You just made things. So we just started making things, and then remarkably, it took on a life of its own. But I always thought I would have a real job, and then I would get to continue working on music as my hobby. And I was hoping that the real job would support my music habit. And again, it's a miracle that music took on this life of its own.
So how did you start working with people like LL Cool J and the Beastie Boys? Did you approach them, or what happened?
The Beastie Boys needed a DJ. They were a punk rock band, and decided they made a song before I met them called Cookie Puss, which was it was sort of a novelty. It was a funny novelty song that was popular on college radio, and it was their first foray into a hip hop style of music. and they asked me to be their DJ, and I DJ'd for them. And then through that, we ended up making License to Ill.
Kick it!
The first rap record I produced was by Tila Rock, and it's called It's Yours. It's a 12-inch single that was popular in its day. I was living in the dorm room at NYU, and again, I didn't know anything about the music business at all. And I went to this club in the Grill and would see these DJs play and these rap artists play, and I always had a strong opinion of the material. There were certain things that I really liked and other things I didn't like as much. And it seemed obvious to me that this is better than this. And I remember there was a group called the Treacherous 3 who were my favorite rap group. And they had these maybe 3 singles, 12-inch singles on Enjoy Records that were the best hip-hop records, in my opinion, of that time. The best. And then they signed to a new label, Sugar Hill, and I didn't even know what that meant. And they put out an album, and their album wasn't as good as any of the 3 songs to me, as their, number one, in my mind, number 1 fan. And they played it in a grill, and I got to meet one of them, and I said, I'd like to, let's have a meeting. And he came to my dorm room for a meeting, and his name is Guru-murthy, great rapper, one of the great rappers of that era. And again, you have to understand, this is the Club Negril held maybe 200 people. So just get a sense of, and the 200 people were coming to go to Negril on Tuesday night. They weren't coming to see the Treacherous 3 because most of the people there didn't know who they were. So it was a very underground world. Guru-murthy comes to the dorm room, and I said, I listened to these new songs, and I feel like these other songs were better. Maybe we could work together in some way. I get back to what was good about this. And he said, well, we're signed Sugar Hill. We can't do it. We can't do that. But talk to Special K, who's another member of the group. He said his, I can't remember if it was his brother or his cousin. He's got a brother or cousin who's a really good rapper. And maybe that would be a way to start making these things. And that's what happened. I called Special K. He came for a meeting at the dorm. He wrote this song, It's Yours, and gave it to Tila Rock to perform. And we recorded it, and it came out, and it became, again, a hit in the standards of the time. And it took a long time. It took probably a year for this song to kind of grow. And that was the first step. And then based on artists liking that song, I started getting demos at the dorm room, and one of the demos was LL Cool J.
My radio, believe me, I like it loud. I'm the man with the box that can rock the crowd. Walking down the street to the hardcore beat while my JVC vibrates the concrete. I'm sorry if you can't understand, but I need a radio inside my hand. Don't mean to offend other citizens, but I kick my volume way past 10.
And did you know your way around a studio? Did you understand music production?
Not really. I still
So you
don't.
were just kind of doing it
no,
instinctively?
I still really don't. Like I usually work with an engineer who knows how the equipment works, and I just describe what I'm hearing. I mean, I can work with the drum machine a bit, rudimentary, to create the beats, and I could DJ a bit to do scratching, which I did on the early Def Jam records. But I wouldn't say that's my strength at all.
So your strength was knowing what you wanted to hear.
Yeah, or knowing when I heard it, because that's another part of it. A lot of it's trial and errors. Try things. Is this better? Is this better? I like this one better. Okay, now let's try these. This is this better? Is this better? And a lot of A/B testing. A lot. All to this day. That's the job.
And are artists on the whole prepared to do that? I mean, to sort of try this, try that.
Some are, some aren't. Some I've had very few situations where an artist gets frustrated. There have been a few, but I've worked with hundreds, and most of them like are excited that anybody cares enough to want it to be the best it could be, and are willing to do whatever it takes. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. I don't set a production schedule. It's like, okay, we have these weeks to make this thing happen. It's not possible. Art doesn't get made on schedule like that. So if I'm involved in a project, it's going to take as long as it's going to take, and there may be other things going on at the same time, or we may interrupt it for a reason. Like, okay, we did this, and now maybe it's time to go write more songs, and now we'll do it again, and we'll keep doing that until we get to a point where there's enough material where it's undeniable.
Do you have preferred musical tastes, or do you listen to everything?
I listen to a lot. When I say everything, I don't listen to music that I don't like, but I like music in all kinds of, if you mean like genres, I listen to all kinds of music, but I don't force myself to listen to things I don't like.
Because I suppose hearing you talk about the line from punk to hip hop, I suppose it then does make sense that you then go into rock.
I didn't start as a hip hop only lover who devoted myself to hip hop. That was not the case. I grew up loving the Beatles, and from the Beatles, then I went through a phase of loving comedy albums, and I loved comedy. Then I liked, at that point in time, I was probably 13 years old, and I listened to Kiss and Ted Nugent and Aerosmith and the big rock acts of the day, and that was the music I listened to then. And then punk rock happened, and then I listened to punk rock, and it's constantly changing. It's constantly changing. Now I listen to more classical music than anything else, and I didn't when I was a child.
So whose idea was Run DMC and Aerosmith? Was that you?
That was my idea.
Swinging with the boys in tune, and the feet is flying up in the air. Swinging, hey, diddle, with the titty in the middle, and it's swinging like I just don't care.
It was an interesting moment. I'll tell you how it happened. I went to a dinner. At this point in time, Def Jam existed. It was getting very popular. And when I say very popular, we were selling a lot of albums, which is an important key, because when you sell a lot of albums, people who don't care about you all of a sudden care about you, and that's what was happening. So there was a case where someone from a label in California were wining and dining me, wanting me to make music for them based on all the success we were having with Def Jam. And one of the questions, this person who, again, liked me, liked the fact that these things were successful, wanted to work with me, said, why do you think people like this stuff? After all, it's not music. I thought, wow, it's interesting that someone in the music business perceives it not only not as music they don't like, that they don't even see it as music. That's how outside it was. I thought, I feel like people just don't understand. And I just had this puzzle. I know there's a way for people to understand what this is. It's just they just don't understand the context of it. And we finished the Run DMC album, Raising Hell, without Walk This Way on it. And I remember thinking, it's not done. It's not done. I loved it. It was great, but I felt like there's some other thing that we can do that's going to make this mean more. And then the idea was, okay, maybe there's a cover song. Maybe there's a song we can take that's familiar, so people understand it's music because they already know the music, and put it through the hip hop filter without changing it very much. That was another key piece. If it reinterpreted to the point of where you didn't recognize the original, that wouldn't have solved this this lack of communication. And so I went through my record collection and found Walk This Way. And the beauty of Walk This Way, it served two functions. One, the first thing I was looking for was vocals that can be done, that essentially work as non-melodic vocals. And that song always, from the Aerosmith version, it's phrasing. It's dun 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 dun. That's how the verse works. It doesn't have any melody. So essentially, that's how a rap song works. It's no melody, more about the phrasing. So it already solved the vocal issue. And then the other piece of it that's interesting is that the drum break from Walk This Way was already a familiar song in hip-hop circles. No one had ever heard the words in hip-hop, but they knew the drum beat. So it's like, okay, it's already within the canon of hip-hop musically, and lyrically it can work as a Run DMC song. So that was and I remember asking Run D to do it, and they're like, it's like, they called it Toys in the Attic, because that was the name of the album that it was on. And in the hip-hop world, that was the Toys in the Attic break. No one knew who Aerosmith was. No one knew there was a song called Walk This Way. It's the Toys in the Attic break. And they're like, yeah, we'll use the Toys in the Attic break. And I said, but I want you to say what they're saying. And they're like, what are you talking? It's like, that's crazy. I'm not going to do that. And I remember Russell, who's Run's brother, calling him and says, do what Rick said. So that happened, and then we got to make that song. And
Did you have a eureka moment where you were doing it, going, "This is working"?
not at all.
No.
No. What happens is everything we make, we think it's really good. If you hear it, if it comes out, that means we really like it. And you never know. You never know what others react to.
You were sort of building up to that right from the beginning, weren't you? Because you put Back in Black
Yeah.
on the Beastie
But that's
Boys.
what I like. That's what I like. Again, it was the music I like. It was in the same way I said, as artists, we take in information and then recapitulate it out. Those are examples. I didn't even know I was doing it then. That was just what you did. One of the things that I loved so much about hip hop from the beginning, and that was something that was missed prior to Def Jam. One of the things I was excited in the records that I made was that it's an art form of montage. If you listen to early hip hop records, you don't hear that yet, because the people who were making the hip hop records weren't hip hop people. They were people who had record companies and saw this new fad, and then they made them the way that they made older R&B records, except they had someone rapping on it. So the music was not yet hip hop. But when you went out to a club, it was much more, there were many more rock beats. There were many, like Billy Squier, Big Beat is an important one. It was music, it was all types of music put through this DJ filter that made hip hop. And I wanted the records to reflect that as much as the person rapping.
So how have you since then worked out who to work with?
Either I hear something that I love and want to participate. Example would be James Blake. I love James Blake's music. I got to work with James Blake. That's one way that it happens. Another is an artist will come to me. I see where they're coming from. And if I like where they're coming from, that's a big piece. And then if I listen to the music, I look for, I think if there's a way in that I can help. I'll give you an example, recent example. I produced an album with The Strokes. Their last album is called The New Abnormal. And I like it very much. I think it came out great. And we're in the middle of a new album now that we're recording in Costa Rica. Beautiful album. And I don't know when it'll be done, but we've got the basic tracks and it's beautiful. With The Strokes, they had asked me to produce them 2 times before The New Abnormal, and both times they had sent me demos, and I listened to the demos, and I just couldn't see a way in. Like, I didn't know how to help. I didn't know what to do. So I ended up not working on those. Same with the Chili Peppers. Like, the Chili Peppers asked me to produce an album before Blood Sugar Sex Magic, maybe 2 albums before, and I met with them, and I just didn't see how to participate. I didn't know how to be part of that. But then the Strokes sent me demos for The New Abnormal, which were maybe the worst demos of all of them, but they were seeds of things that I could imagine. It's like, oh, I can see it was like a 30-second phone recording, whereas in the past they were like real demos. These were the lowest quality and a guitar riff, like very tiny little fragments. But those fragments, I wanted to hear the songs that those fragments were part of, and I would be happy to participate in helping flesh those out. So that was what we did for that album.
You're often associated with sort of stripping back production. I mean, is that right?
Sometimes. I mean, my taste tends to be there is something about less is more. I live as a minimalist. I live in an empty house. I like the fewer things playing, the more you can hear each of them, the personality of each of them speak. If you record one guitar, you hear the sound of guitar. If you record 10 guitars playing the same thing, you hear guitar, but you don't hear a guitar player. And I like hearing a guitar player. I like hearing the personality. Now, if there's an artist whose trip is not hearing the personality, and if it's creating a wall of sound, I'm happy to participate in that. It just is not my default. It's not my default.
And because what's really interesting, I think, is how you can do that on music. I mean, take Slayer.
Yes.
Which I would not normally associate with being able to listen to individual things.
Yeah.
And I haven't listened to a lot of it, to be honest, but I listened to some of it before doing this, and I thought, and actually you can.
You can
and
hear everything.
that was surprising to me, that you can hear the snare drum or the guitar riff or whatever it is in what is otherwise, to me, sort of associated as just sort of this wall of noise.
Yes. That's an interesting thing about Slayer. Let's talk about them for a minute. I have not realized this until you're asking this question, but this is what is coming up from what you're saying, based on what we talked about earlier. When you treat everything the same, it waters down what it is. Speed metal was a new thing. The people who were recording speed metal up until Rain and Blood, which is the first Slayer album I made, recorded speed metal more like other hard rock or heavy metal. And it's different. It's all different. Everything we make is different. And if you look at it in hip hop, if you make it like it's an R&B record, it's an R&B record with somebody rapping. If you make it like going to the hip hop club, it's hip hop. With speed metal, if you treat it like Black Sabbath, it won't sound like, it won't do what Slayer does. And that has, in that case, Slayer they play very fast, super fast. And the nature of things that are fast is they come very close together. Like the kick drums are like, da-da-da, like super fast. When you listen to Led Zeppelin records, the kick drum goes, pooh, pooh, bah, pooh. So if you have someone playing and you treat it like Led Zeppelin, it's just going to be a blur of noise. You won't hear any of it. And that's what was happening up until Rain and Blood. And this is really, in each case, it comes from my lack of experience, lack of the right way to do it. The right way to record rock drums is the way Led Zeppelin did it. But in my mind, not if you're Slayer. So in some ways, because I don't know, I wasn't experienced enough to know this is how you do it, I'm listening to it for what it is. And for what it is this very precise, tight thing. And you want to hear the precise tightness of it. And up until that point, no one had recorded it that way because that's just not the way you record things. Do you know what I'm saying?
And how do you do that? I mean, do you just, when you tell the engineer,
yeah, we talk about it.
I just want to hear it.
Yeah, we talk about it.
So do you understand what it is what is the process?
No.
That delivers
No,
that?
And I don't care. I don't care what the process is. We talk about it. It's like, I'm not hearing this. Why am I not hearing this? Oh, because we do it this way. It's like, are we doing it that way because we have to do it that way or because that's what you usually do? If it's because what you usually do, it doesn't matter. We need to hear this. We need to hear what makes this this. And that's the case for everything. So it's coming to things with this beginner's mind, which you talk about in the book, of starting from scratch. We have this beautiful thing before us, in the case of Slayer, for me, this beautiful thing. How can we best get the energy that's being created here conveyed so that other people can hear what we're hearing? And if you do it the way you do everything else, it won't be as specific to this case and could completely undermine the beauty of what it is. There was a movement in Washington, D.C. called Go-Go, which I thought was going to be the next hip-hop. And there was a group called Trouble Funk, was my favorite of those groups. There was also Chuck Brown, the Soul Searchers, many great groups. And they put out these independent, self-recorded recordings that were great. And Island Records signed all of these groups because they were going to corner the market on the new it wasn't hip hop, but it was like the next thing after hip hop. And they produced these albums that didn't at all reflect what was great about Go-Go. And you may have never heard of Go-Go. And if you haven't, it's because of this. It's because the people who helped lift it treated it like everything else. Instead of making the best version of Go-Go they could, they tried to make it putting Go-Go through the filter of commercial R&B music. And it wasn't good. As a Go-Go fan, it wasn't good.
And I suppose what you've done with the book is to apply all these lessons to life in general.
Yes, and the book doesn't have any of the stories that I'm telling you. It's only what I've learned from doing this forever, for as long as I can remember, the principles. And I didn't know them when I started working on the book. I didn't know what these principles were. I reverse engineered decisions that were made over the years. Why did we do it this way? And I tried to understand it. And then based on why, is there a principle that could help somebody else? And that was the mission of the book.
I mean, are you very spiritual?
I am.
And what, I mean, I saw you at the beginning of the interview, just when I was doing the intro, sort of close your eyes and take a moment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you do meditation? Do you do,
Yes.
you know?
I learned to meditate when I was 14 years old. It played a big role in who I am. I know that because from the time I was 14 until I went to NYU, I was probably 17. So for 3 years, I meditated twice a day. Then I stopped when I went to NYU. Then I moved to California, and I started again. And from the first time, my first meditation, after not doing it for 4 or 5, maybe 5 years, from the first time, I realized, oh, I know what this is because of the time I had done it. Like, I know what this is, and this is a big part of who I am. It's been a big part of who I am even in the 5 years that I wasn't doing it because I had done it for the 3. And since then, it's been a lifelong combination of TM was the first one, but since I've done Vipassana, I've done many different practices, and now I'm doing a Tai Chi ruler practice, which is beautiful. Sometimes they're physical, sometimes they're sitting, but I'm looking for answers, and any way that I can find, and I'm completely open-minded. I don't hold any beliefs very strongly. I'm very open to changing.
I mean, you talk about the importance of having an open mind in the book. I mean, is meditation and that spirituality, is that what helps you?
I believe so. I believe by going back to this state of clearing everything. And, you know, we talk to ourselves all day, and we tell ourselves stories. We explain things to ourselves. We see something happen that doesn't make sense. Every day you'll see something that doesn't make sense. And then we'll make up a story that explains what could have happened. And as soon as we have that first story in our mind, at the moment it's, oh, maybe it's that. And then we don't think about it again. We're okay. We don't have to puzzle it forever. And then later in the day, if we were to think back about what happened, we don't think about what actually happened. We remember our story. This is what happened. We never know that that's what actually happened. That's our story of what happened. So I'm aware of that. And I never assume that. Also, I was a magician when I was young. So in magic, you create an illusion where the audience sees it and they think something is happening, yet you know something different is happening. And that happens in our life all the time. We see things, we misunderstand them, we misread things all the time. And knowing that we have the capability to misread things, I hold everything very softly, because maybe that's the case. I don't know. Maybe, but with everything.
That also gives you a great flexibility in thinking. The kind of flexibility you would have needed to come back to your career in creating this amazing moment of Johnny Cash singing "Hurt."
Yeah.
So how did that happen? Here's a man who was kind of ignored at that time. He was past it.
Yes.
How did you make him, suddenly, with this track, which was a cover, it wasn't even his or your track. How did that happen?
The relationship with Johnny Cash started at that point in time. I had worked with mostly new artists. Almost all of the artists that I worked with at that time, it was their first recording, first or second, new artist, and was having great success. And I just had the thought, I wonder if this way of looking at things would work for a grown-up artist. And so it started really as an experiment, just to see what was possible. And I thought about, okay, what are the great grown-up artists? Maybe someone who hasn't been doing their best work for a period of time. And the first person I thought of was Johnny Cash, who he had two huge, in the 1950s, simultaneously with Elvis on Sun Records. He had this huge success. And then again with his Prison album, another huge success. He was the most successful artist sold more records than anyone else on Columbia Records. And then now, these years later, he had been dropped by Columbia. He had been dropped by 2 labels and was playing at dinner theaters. And I went to see him play at a dinner theater, and I thought, I feel like he's great. It's just he's not doing his best work. He had done his best work, but he's not doing his best work. And would it be possible? And we got together and talked about it, and he didn't understand why I wanted to work with him. He had I remember after his funeral, I was on flight home, and there was a person came up to me on the plane who I didn't know, and said, I just wanted to tell you, Johnny, it was a friend of Johnny, so I didn't know. He's like, Johnny always loved you because he said you believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. And he told this friend, like, he always would trust you because you trusted in him when he didn't trust in himself. It was beautiful. It was just a beautiful moment. The way that Hurt came about in particular, when I thought of Johnny Cash as a mythical figure. I know he was a human being. I got to hang out with the human being. But the power of Johnny Cash was the man in black, this mythical figure. And I looked for songs that he could sing that suited the man in black, not necessarily my friend Johnny Cash. And Hurt was one of those songs where, if you listen to the original Trent Reznor version of the song, it's not something that you would think would be appropriate for Johnny. And musically, when Johnny heard it, he's just like, he just thought I lost my mind. So I created a demo. I might have even sung it myself. Had a guitar player play the song, and I can't remember, but I think I might have sung it. I have a vague memory of singing it, just to kind of to showcase the lyrics, because that's what it was about. It was about when looking for a cover song, the lyrics are a big part of it, because musically it may change. It may change from what the original is. So the song is really the words and the melody. And I thought about the lyrics, and I thought about the difference between Trent singing a song of regret. I think he was 21 when he wrote it, maybe 22. So when you're 21 and you sing about regret, you have your whole life to work it out. When you're 70 and you sing about a life of regret, it's really heavy.
But I remember everything. What have I become? My sweetest friend. Everyone I know goes away in the air.
It's heavy in a different way. And that was part of the thought, was that this is this terribly sad song of regret coming from someone who has lived long enough that you'd think they would have gotten over it, learned past it, like Trent has. So Johnny doing that song really had this power, and it seemed, when he sang it with such feeling. It sounded like he wrote it. He owned the song. I remember Trent saying, it's like, it's not my song anymore. And now when Trent plays it live, he does the Johnny Cash version.
Yeah, and did Johnny Cash perform it, or was it his story? Did he make it his story? Did he feel it?
Yeah. Let me see if I can even answer that. I'm not sure I can answer that. I think one of Johnny's greatest strengths as an artist was that his ability to take material and sing it in a way where we believe this is what he's saying. We believe him. He had the voice of authority. And I think it's a skill set he had, because he was able to deliver many songs with that conviction. That's really what, he wasn't a great singer in terms of, he didn't have much of a range, or his ability was to tell you a story and have you know he meant it. That was his strength. So I can't tell you whether it's how he did that, but he did it that's why he was great.
I mean, do you ever think about sort of how lucky you've been? I mean, I said to
Yes.
I said to my dad last night, I was interviewing you, and he'd just watched the McCartney
Yeah.
thing, and he said, "Oh, that's going to be good fun." And then I said to my 15-year-old this morning, he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to interview a music producer called Rubin." He said, "Oh, right, what's he done?" And I said, 99 Problems. He went, "Oh, right, okay." I mean, like, my dad's 88, my son's 15.
Yeah.
He's spanning a lot of generations of music.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's, I can't believe it. I'm ultimately a fan of music. That's it. I'm really a fan. I'm not qualified in any way to do anything other than love music. And the fact that this has happened is really, feel blessed and thankful. And anything that I can do to share beautiful things, that's my interest. The reason for writing the book was I get to work with a lot of artists, and over the course of my life, if I make, let's say I've made 8 albums a year for 40 years, you add that up, it's a lot of artists for anyone who does my job. It's still a small number of artists compared to people in the world. And I thought, any way that this, whatever I've picked up, can help anyone be good at what they do, I would love to pass that on. And that's why the book exists.
Interviewing McCartney, just as I mentioned it, I mean, was that you? I mean, did you become the teenager, or was that you
That's me now.
As you now?
That's
Yeah.
me now. Yeah. I'm a lifelong Beatles fan. I had the idea for the piece because I don't know if you know this, that more has been written. There are more books about the Beatles than anyone other than Jesus. Jesus, the most has been written about Jesus. Beatles are next.
So they're not quite bigger than God.
Not yet.
Still.
Not yet. Well, we have time. We have time. As someone who's collected so many Beatles books, Beatles albums, Beatles bootlegs, all things Beatles, I would go to Beatles conventions. I'm really a true fan. One of the things that I thought was missing in this story was about the musicianship. Is very little. Like most of the Beatles stories are about Beatlemania or the incredible songwriting, both of which pretty good to talk about. The thing that was unsaid was, if you make a list of the great bass players in the world, you might not even put Paul on it because you think of him as Beatle Paul, the guy who wrote Yesterday. You know, you don't think of him as he's not just a bass player. But if it were not for his bass playing, we might not know Beatle Paul. And that's true of that band. They were so great that was just a missing piece of the story. And I called Paul, and he answered the phone, which is incredible. And I said, have this idea. Let's make a documentary about you, the musician, you, the bass player. It's a story I haven't heard. And he said, okay, let's do it. And it's like, it's surreal. The whole thing's surreal. The fact he picked up the phone is surreal. The fact that he said, yes, let's do it, it's surreal. The fact that it happened is surreal. And the fact that people have seen it and liked it. The whole thing, it's like a dream.
I mean, one of the things that it occurred to me watching it was as well, that for fans of any band, what you would love to do is what you were able to do, which is to go back to the tapes and isolate the tracks. If you do that, do you think you know, is the magic when it all comes together? Or is there magic in those individual tracks that, you know, because you were picking that out?
Yes, both. There's magic in both. Clearly, the sum total is the reason we care. That said, for anything that you love, to understand how it's put together is fascinating. You know, people who are car fanatics like to take apart cars and put them back together again. It's like that. It's like we get to see under the hood of the Beatles, which we were never able to do before. And it's revelatory to hear the things that you've heard your entire life. My first memory of music when I was 3 years old was hearing the Beatles. So it's the music that's been in my life the most. I've probably listened to Beatles music more than anything else over the course of my life. And whatever little bit I do know about music came from listening to the Beatles. That's it. That's my education. So to be able to hear how they did it, and you still don't really know how they did it, but we're a step close. You know, it's just, I want to hear everything. I want to hear everything. I want to hear every outtake. I want to hear everything just to try to get closer to this thing that seems so beyond our comprehension. They made 13 albums in 7 years. If you look at what artists do today, a big band today might put out an album every few years. Think of the breadth and depth and changes that the Beatles made creatively over the course of the 13 albums, and think that happened in a 7-year cycle. It's unbelievable. It's not possible, except they did it.
I'm imagining, and I don't know whether this is right or wrong, that you've influenced Jay-Z on that, on music, rock and guitar, and even the Beatles. Is that true?
Not that I'm aware of. No. I mean, it's possible, but not that I'm aware of.
Because he's on that sort of same track, I suppose, line of bringing different things together, isn't he?
I have no idea.
Okay, I just imagined that, but maybe not. I was hoping you were going to tell me, that's the reason he did Gospel.
No, I have no idea. All I know is how we made 99 Problems, but I don't know much. I'm hoping to learn more about Jay's process. I'd love to. I think he's the way that he does what he does is so, no one understands. I mean, people who love hip hop love Jay-Z. The amount of people in the world who know who Jay-Z is and who understand why he's great and why he's Jay-Z, it's the tiniest fraction of people who understand why he's great. So that would be an interesting thing to think about, how to demonstrate why Jay-Z is Jay-Z. That'll be a good
I mean,
homework assignment.
could you have a stab at explaining it? Why is he so great?
It'll take something like McCartney 3-2-1 with Jay-Z for us to experience that.
Yeah,
And
but he is as special as that. Do you think?
Absolutely. On another planet. He's on another planet, and it's his lyrical ability is on another planet. He's the only only rapper I've ever worked with who doesn't write anything down. Everything you've heard on all of his records is, I want to say it's not completely spontaneous because it doesn't just happen, but he just sits and listens to the beat and mumbles. He doesn't write anything down. And he does it long enough, maybe 20 minutes, you don't even think, you're not even paying it, you're having a conversation, he's there over and over again, you have no idea what he's doing, and then it's like, okay, got it, and he goes in the other room, and he does this complicated, long thing. I don't know how he even remembers it, much less just created it and remembers it spontaneously, and then he says, okay, let's try it again. And he does it again, and the words will be the same, but the phrasing will be different, the cadence will be different, almost like a jazz solo. If you know the melody, each time you play it, it might have different inflections. He'll do that. And all spontaneously, in the moment, from the top of his head. I've never seen anything remotely like it.
I mean, it sort of brings me back to where we started, because towards the end of the book, you get to that sort of, creation and what you get from it. How do we as individuals avoid comparing ourselves to greatness and putting ourselves down and saying, well, this is rubbish?
Yeah.
How do we get the joy from the creativity?
Yeah.
When it's just something we've done?
Yeah. Creativity it's not a, when you say it's rubbish compared to what? That's the thing. It's always, if you look at it in comparison to something else, you're never going to be satisfied. The grass is always greener somewhere else. We each have a singular voice. We each have our own voice. What I do is different than what you do. What you do is different than what you do. What you do is different than what you do. We all do something different. And they're not comparable. They have nothing to do with each other. It's apples and oranges. So if you make something today and you think it can be better, tomorrow you can improve it. You can continually make the thing you're making better. You can learn and practice to do anything. This interesting story, after being vegan, I weighed 100 pounds more than, while I was vegan, I weighed 100 pounds more than I do now. And I met Laird Hamilton, who's a big wave surfer. And he said, this is when I'd lost a bunch of weight after starting to eat animals again. He said, why don't you come to the gym with us? And I've never been to a gym in my life. I have a sedentary life, so I lay on a couch listening to music. That's what I do. That's my life. And he said, come to the gym with us. And he was such an interesting person and so good at what he did. I wanted to be around him just to see what it was like to be good at what he's good at. It's interesting to be around people who are good at anything. So I got to hang around with him, and he said, okay, today, let's do push-ups. I could not do one push-up. Couldn't do one push-up. And he broke it up. He's like, okay, let's break it into pieces, and had me do a part of a push-up and a different part of a push-up and a different, can Can you be in a plank position? I could be in a plank position. Okay. Could you be, and he had me do all the pieces. He's like, okay, now if you combine this one, step one with step two, let's do step one and step two, and I can do that. He's like, okay, now do step three to step two. And he broke it up in a way where I was able to do one push-up, and it was amazing. And then through that, I worked up to the point of being able to do 100 consecutive push-ups, which is insane. Insane. And it's something that, again, I didn't believe I could ever do it. And through really trusting someone who knew about something, showing me how to break it up, and taking the voices in my head of I can't do it away to something he said to me. I said, I can't do it. He's like, no, you never say you can't do it. You say, I haven't done it yet. I haven't done it yet is the answer to anything you haven't done yet. There's nothing that you can't do until we know. And I think that's a big part of creativity, is accepting that we can do anything, that reason and rationality is not always our friend. It's not there to support us. It's reason and rationality tell us what we can't do. The arts teach us what we can do and what we can go beyond. Reason tells us what's normal. Normal's not anything to aspire to. We want to go past normal. And so we all have this potential. Again, I'm not saying we can all be the best in the world, but it's not about that. We can all be better than we are now. And that's the work, is what are we, and are we willing to commit ourselves to do everything we can to be better than we are now?
So if you could change the world, wave a magic wand, how would you change it?
The first piece that I would think about is communication. And this magic wand, it's difficult because I believe language is insufficient. Like, I'm telling you words, you're hearing what I'm saying, you're imagining what I'm thinking, maybe 70%, maybe you're getting 70%, maybe. We can't really hear each other. We don't know what each other really are getting at. So I would say if we could communicate in a way, if I could wave a magic wand, and you could really know what I felt, and I could really know what you felt, if we all could really feel each other, I think it'd be peace on earth.
Rick Rubin, thank you very much indeed for sharing your ways to change the world and some of the ideas from a remarkable book. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, then please do give us a rating or a review. You can watch all of these podcasts on the Channel 4 News YouTube channel. Our producer is Nina Hodgson. Until next time, bye-bye.